Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday morning. It is a foggy, cloudy, gray, 39-degree Wednesday morning here in the city of Philadelphia. You may hear foghorns in the background. They're actual real foghorns. Believe it or not, this is a city that is on a major waterway, and we actually have to run foghorns when there's real fog in the city. We may not hear it quite as often as, say, San Francisco or any of the West Coast cities that get regular fog and whatnot, but we do have to hear them when there is fog. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about other random city noises that you might hear, just because this came up yesterday in the news. We're also going to talk tax tips and arts shift as PAFA closes, AI emerges, and we're talking about the quote, artists' role is to change perceptions, tax laws, and even technology. That's a quote by Kara Walker, well-known artist. If you don't know what she does, look her up. I guarantee you'll be impressed. Please feel free to drop any questions that you have for our special guest, Amy Smith, in the chat on any of the avenues. Our associate producer, Meg Angelino, will see them and relay them, or I will see them and I will ask them. In local news, Fishtown, the section of Philadelphia north and east of Broad, is having a little bit of a, what do you want to call it, kerfuffle. There's a church that is on Berks and Gall, the Holy Name of Jesus Church. And for over a decade, the belfry has been silent at that church. Reverend Alfred Bradley decided to plan a Christmas time surprise for the city residents and had the belfry modernized with digital bells, so that he could play the bells. And since Christmas time, he's been playing the bells at 9 a.m., 6 p.m., and on the hour with short hourly notices. It's church bells. I live around the corner from a church. I hear church bells every morning. You might have heard them in the background of this broadcast every once in a while because I live in a city. There's things like church bells. A resident of the area that lives near the church posted a Facebook post wherein she complained about the noise of the church bells and asked if there was any authority to stop the church from playing the bells. And no, there's not really. The noise ordinances in a city can't possibly cover things like church bells and loud music during the day. And he doesn't play them at night when the noise ordinances do kick into effect. So he's perfectly within his rights to play church bells, and some people actually like them, some people don't. What I find most interesting about all of this is that if you review the posts on local Facebook groups, local to Fishtown, the support or counter argument for or against the church bells is all tied up in this weird jingoistic, nationalistic pride in Christianity and whiteness and neighborhood, and I just don't get it. I'm gonna go ahead and bring Amy on screen, and let's do introductions and let's talk about some of this stuff. Amy, welcome on screen. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Yes. Hi, James. Happy to be here. I'm Amy Smith. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a multi-hyphenate dance and theater artist, educator, facilitator. I do tax prep for artists and bookkeeping and financial management for various artists and arts organizations around town, and a little bit of anti-racism co-facilitation work, usually with Faith Jones Jackson, who's a Black theater artist I met through Art Equity. So yeah, I wear many hats in the arts community, but this time of year, most people know me as tax prep Amy.
Tax prep Amy. That's super valuable. And I wanna cover that in a minute here. What I want to get your opinion because we were talking in the pre-show. I always like our artists on this show because I feel like artists can develop a sound opinion about a topic relatively quickly. Where do you think these things all get tied up together? Because I wanna relate this back into what's going on in the Republican Party and the primary Republican primaries right now. Where does this all get tied together? Like, where does this, you know, it's church bells. And then the primary argument against against the person that wants the church bells to be quieter or silent is, well, you shouldn't have moved into an area that had a church.
Right.
Well, the church bells have been silent for a decade, more than 10 years. I don't think I would have known that there was a church there if I moved into the area. So where does this all get tied into, well, if you don't like it, leave sort of mentality?
Yeah. Oof. And like you say, the Christian nationalism just immediately comes into play because it's Fishtown, which has historically been a racist neighborhood, one of the most racist neighborhoods in Philadelphia. Um, so yeah, I think of course people immediately go to Republican white people or people, right-wing extremist white people, immediately go to um, pride about church and Christianity and um, kind of against the separation of church and state and a conflation of all these things, which is also happening in public schools. My husband's a public school teacher in um, a town that's very politically conservative. And it's like all these Christian families want to both pull their kids out of school and homeschool them or send them to Christian school, and also ruin our school with prayer and book bans and anti-LGBTQ things that they think are Christian values. So yeah, it's like it doesn't surprise me at all that people immediately go into white nationalist Christian pride in Fishtown when they're talking about a church. But it is the solution is simple. If you don't want to hear noise, don't live in the city.
Yeah, I did have to. I'm kind of on both sides of the argument in my comments in the Facebook group because I'm a little bit confused about like like, okay, it's just church bells. I mean, they're relatively inoffensive. It's not, they're not denominational. There's not denominational church bells. The one of the main attractions of Philadelphia is the Liberty Bell, which is a broken church bell. We've been using church bells in this country since European settlement. For everything from fire alarms to like just a
Part of
timepiece.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while I'm not against church bells, I can see where they might be a little bit annoying. I mean, they do catch my attention. They intrude on, like anything that I'm doing as far as, if I'm on a broadcast or on a meeting on Zoom or even on a phone call with somebody, they might hear the. I don't think anybody would care that they hear the
No.
church bells though. Um, yeah, so I mean, like, it's just I'm back and forth on it. I have no the only opinion of on this thing that I have is why the heck are you getting all nationalistic about it? Like, you don't need a reason to like the church bells. You don't need a reason to, that to not like the church bells. You don't need to justify or deny somebody else their justification for liking or disliking the church bells with some call to, oh, this is the way it's always been, or
Right.
who cares?
It's like this, on the right, there's this like massive confusion about what is freedom. You know, people want freedom to do what they want to do, but they also want the freedom to tell women when they can't have an abortion, or, force trans kids to use bathrooms that don't reflect their identity. And, so I think this church bells issue is kind of uh unsurprising in that way, because there's this muddying of the waters of what is freedom now in these lands currently called the United States in 2024.
So, in the theme of what is freedom, the Republican National Convention is going on. We're into our second state voting in their primaries. Trump has won handily both states, and even Nikki Haley supporters are saying, Trump's probably going to win this. It's not looking good. And the only person speaking like she has any path to victory is her campaign manager, which I suppose is your job at that point. Um, um, so why are and on the Democrat side of things, we're of course running Joe Biden because Joe Biden is president. You don't run a new candidate when you have an incumbent president. I mean, it's just never been done. I don't know. So we're running the only two people who could possibly lose either party. Like, there's been lots of commentary that Joe Biden is the only one who could lose on the Democratic Party in a national election, and there's been lots of commentary that Trump is the only one who could lose in the Republican Party in a national election. Why are we running the two losers in a national election? Why isn't there a viable candidate here? Where did all the viable candidates go? Like, even if you look at like the competition in the Republican National Convention, Nikki Haley is, I mean, she's Christo-fascist, even though she's not Christian and not, not American. um,
Well, she's American.
no, she's
not
American.
white.
She's not white, but she's a white Christo-fascist in all but personal identity. All of her policies, all of her speeches, all the stuff that she talks about is very white Christo-fascist.
Yeah.
Um,
Sadly, I am no fan of Chris Christie. I live in New Jersey, and he, fucked the teachers, and anyway, but he was, to me, he was a viable candidate. Asa Hutchinson was a viable candidate. Like, there were people out there that were speaking truth about Trump, but they immediately got swatted to the side because that's how the Republican Party is now. It's like it's fully MAGA, like it's fully a cult of personality. And even Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, all they did was, try to walk the fine line between identifying themselves as different from Trump, but also loving Trump and
and everything he did and stands for. So
they
yeah,
can't
so
say
then
anything bad about him, or they'll immediately be booted from the nomination.
so I guess this begs the question: how where like how does this entrench it? How does this keep entrenching itself deeper? There was a like we often talk. People commonly often talk of political movements as like pendulum swings. I don't personally believe this because I think it's a little bit more complex than that. But like if there's a big movement one way, there's going to be a big movement the other way. Blah blah blah. If pendulum swings is true, why? How is this getting so much further entrenched? There was a mild rebuke to essentially a sitting president attempting to throw a coup over an incoming president, and that mild rebuke included sending a bunch of people to jail, not very many. Like, like probably like 10% of the people who went into the Capitol went to jail for any given time, and not for very long. A lot of the people that first went into jail are out of jail already. Um, the girl from Pennsylvania who was literally stole government property with classified documents on it, Nancy Pelosi's computer. Um, she's free. And during her pre-trial detention, she was detained at home with an ankle bracelet and allowed to go to things like the Ren Fair. I mean,
So despicable. It's so embarrassing. It's just embarrassing what we've devolved into. And like you say, we have two losers running against each other. Everyone on the left is gonna hold their nose and vote for Grandpa Joe Biden because that's what we have to do. But like, how long do we have to wait for a reform of our electoral system? It's pathetic. It's disgusting. It's we're under the grip of a fascist minority in this country, and just a few tweaks would make that impossible. A few tweaks to our voting system, our electoral system.
and
Um,
what's amazing to me is that there's so little support for it, and yet they hold this outsized view. That was one of the other things in the Facebook thread in Fishtown, is like somebody responded with, "Well, majority rules, and the majority likes the bells," and I'm like, "You don't know that. Nobody held a vote."
yeah. And does it have to be like other countries have parliamentary systems where various parties get together and have to form coalitions to form a government.
Hmm.
I mean, that would never work in this country because we're way too um, what's the word I'm looking for? Unable to collaborate. We're
Yeah.
not good at collaboration and coalition building in this country. But I still think I could envision a world in which there are, white nationalist Christian parties like there are in many Western governments. There are moderate Republican parties, the, Mitt Romneys of the world, or a party that reflects those views. There are right-wing Democrats, which is like basically 90% of the Democratic Party. There are
And like
socialist.
100% of the Philadelphia City Council. Anyway.
Exactly, right. There's Green Party, that's actually fighting for environmental justice.
There's
There's
progressives.
Working Family Party.
Yeah.
There could be all kinds of parties represented in our government. But again, we've opted into this two-party system that has such a strong hold.
Even just a ranked choice voting system would probably resolve half of this.
Exactly, exactly. I worked in Alaska. I mean, it's being tried. Yeah, a few tweaks to electoral college and not winner take all in electoral, in state electoral college votes, ranked choice. Like there's just a few small tweaks that would make all the difference. And again, get us out from under the grip of these uh, white Christian nationalist fascists.
Let's talk about PAFA. I'm gonna do a rough transition just so we can
Cool.
stay on schedule. PAFA decided to close its degree programs. They had a 50% reduction in student enrollment since 2019. I don't. That doesn't seem like a very fast rate of reduction to me for a college that's funded by things other than its student body.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know the full picture of PAFA's funding, but I would assume that, like most colleges, they get most of their money from the land they own and the government programs that they participate in. I don't know. I
Yeah,
could
I
be
don't
wrong.
know. It might have an endowment too. I don't really know, but it seems like the kind of old school type of organization, nonprofit that would have an endowment.
Right.
Yeah, still these universities and I actually don't know what you'd call PAFA, an academy. They still charge tuition even if they have enough
Right. Yeah. I
endowment.
know. They all charge tuition because they can.
Exactly.
But But much like the arts, especially local arts and smaller theater programs, they don't make their money from the people. They make their money from other sources and use it to offset what they charge the people.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah,
or in theory, I mean, university settings are more like we'll charge you as much as we can get away with, which is whatever everyone else is charging. Uh,
exactly.
but so why close their degree programs?
Well, it's interesting. I saw some posts about this. I read an article about it. I guess it used to be a certificate program, and then they upgraded it into a degree granting program. And my guess is they, quintupled the tuition or whatever they charged when they did that. Um, and in some ways, it's like whenever that happened, and I don't know when, that's like a reflection of the kind of professionalization of artists. And I think there's good and bad to that idea. I think arts workers deserve to be paid for our time and labor, period. And the so that aspect of professionalization of the arts workers, I agree with. And the idea that there are so many MFA, BFA, MFA programs that are just churning out more and more highly credentialed, degreed artists, but there are no jobs for these credentialed and indebted artists to apply for and get that will enable them to pay off their debt from their MFA programs. Like, that's a serious problem in our society. So I feel like half the dance MFA programs in the country should just shut their doors. And PAFA deciding not to be a degree granting program and going back to being a certificate program. To me, I'm like, great, one fewer degree granting, expensive
Well,
arts.
here's the thing though. Like, where do those students and where do those teachers go? Like one of the only places where people with MFAs can go to get a job is usually teaching at the university that
Right.
they graduated from, or
Right. So that makes it a pyramid scheme. And that's what I want the pyramid to collapse because I like, it just makes me so sad that's all these universities just start an MFA program so that they can grant MFAs to their students and then hire their students. But at a certain point, that there's no more, Bernie Madoff's pyramid has to crumble.
well, I'll let you know. I secretly want an MFA, but I know I've always wanted an MFA, but I'll only take one at this point if it's an emeritus. So I'm not going to spend my time in class to
I
prove that
also
I know
don't
what I
have an
want.
MFA. I'm like the least well-educated person in my family.
I guarantee you I'm the least well educated person in our peer group and yeah, I only did 2 years of college. I was 4.0 in Dean's List and President's List for all 4 semesters that I went, but yeah. I so one of the we're going to talk a little bit about AI earlier, but just for transparency's sake, I have been using AI to help me write scripts and business documents and stuff that I'm not good at writing at. After doing an extensive search for writers of minority description and coming up empty, I needed to get the documents made, and I'm not good at writing them, so I started using some AI resources for it. Um, and we'll talk in depth about that a little bit later. But one of the things that the AI suggested I found interesting was that as a topic was that that these students go to Tyler or go to like a course like Skillshare or go to Drexel's arts program, and none of those is an MFA. And also, the reason why I dropped out of college is Drexel's arts program, because Drexel started its current arts program as a combination of engineering and arts as a
Hmm.
BA, And I was interested in computer design. This was 98. And I was interested in computer design and being on the forefront of computer design. And I started taking classes there, but I was actively doing art in the form of photography. And I found that it had a very detrimental effect, like shifting my mindset to follow the coursework and to do what the coursework was leading me to shifted my ability to do my artwork. Like I couldn't do the artwork the same way, and it was changing the way my expression was happening, and I didn't like it. So
Hmm.
that's the main reason why I dropped out of that program. But I was, like I found it both like just doing the research for this show and having that suggestion thrown in there. I found it ironic, like that this would be a suggestion for these art students who are seeking an MFA. Or I don't know. I mean, they're not unique in any sort of way, but they're usually of an artist mindset. They're not Tyler is for like designers and advertisers, people who want to get into marketing. Um,
Hmm.
Skillshare is not a university. It's you're not going to go from seeking an MFA to trying to figure out how to do things on Skillshare. You're going to go to YouTube from seeking an MFA to YouTube to find out how to build your own business. Um,
Hmm.
like where do you see these students going that were in these programs? And also the other thing that's true of these programs is the loss of these programs means there's a lot less seats in arts and fine arts masters in the city of Philadelphia. Where are these students? Probably like 100 or so seeking their MFA. Where are these 100 people going to find seats?
Yeah. Yeah. That really does suck. Um, yeah, and honestly, I think this issue is related to the issue of the percentage or proportion of adjuncts and part-time faculty at universities, which has just grown and grown and grown over the last decades, where, it used to be something like, 60% full-time and tenure track and 40% adjunct. And now it's like at most universities, it's like 80% adjunct and 20% full-time and tenure track. And universities are still getting rid of lines and, leaning even more heavily into hiring um, adjunct faculty, which, in Philadelphia, we've had success unionizing University of the Arts and Temple. So I'm very proud and happy to have been lightly associated with the groups that successfully unionize those faculty. But I fear, and I know from the tax prep work that I do, that artists with MFAs, even those who have found gainful employment in their field teaching their art form at a university level, are still bringing in $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year. I mean, just peanuts for the amount of money and time they've invested into their art form and their teaching work. And that's because universities, they charge as much tuition as they possibly can. They use a market rate to determine how much tuition they can charge and excuse me, and do. And then they use it's like a race to the bottom with the adjunct professors for the most part, where like
Yeah,
when I was at the University of the Arts, it was $2,500 for an entire semester. I mean, that's just ridiculous for the amount of time that it takes to teach any class at University of the Arts. It's gotten better since then, but that's a that's a ridiculous amount of money to pay a highly skilled, highly trained professional.
it's so I don't know the word of the year, the digital word of the year was voted as enshittification. Um, and I'm sure that's not going to translate out on the closed captioning, but enshittification is the term that was coined to say how online platforms are always getting worse, but also harder to leave. Um,
Mm.
and I think the university system is probably the leader in this. They did it first.
Yes,
You know
they
that.
designed enshittification.
Yes, they did. They created enshittification, and then the MBAs who were all graduating in droves in the 80s and 90s suddenly realized, hey, we can copy this thing that we had to live through.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, this ties into our uneven recovery in the performing arts sector topic. Um, the 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 one of the arts sector, the Philadelphia Arts and Cultural, the GPCA, did a study, a post-COVID study of recovery, and found that the recovery in the performing arts is only 15%, compared to on par with the rest of the economy recovery in museums and historical institutions. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of MFA programs are dedicated to performing arts. There's a few in other areas, like, but the grand majority, I would say, of MFA programs are either performing arts or music,
Mm.
which is in itself a performing art. But and so even just the pandemic had the effect of causing this lack of recovery. And so there are even less jobs for those potential MFA students. Um, what I'm interested in here is, I know through the grapevine, I haven't been invited to any of them. I'm not taken that seriously as a producer in the city of Philadelphia, but I know of conversations that have been occurring with production companies and executive producers, about what theater arts and performing arts can do in this post-pandemic society. Not that the pandemic's over. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying post-pandemic because it's an easy point of reference.
Right.
Um, since the economic impact of the pandemic has not waned in the performing arts sector, what they can do to recover. And one of the things, as you noted from doing taxes, that I've also noted is that the salaries for designers, for tradespeople, and the budgets for performing arts uh, pieces have not increased commensurate with. There was a huge uptick in salaries. There was a huge uptick in costs of goods during the pandemic. In the last year, um, uh, I would say that pretty much everything has increased a minimum of 30%. Um, in what it costs to you know buy wood for a set, to what it costs for your lighting designer to pay his rent.
Yep.
Um, Yet there's no way, a, that those things could have been predicted, and b, that they can possibly be made up for by producers in a post-pandemic world where their income hasn't increased any. In fact, some would say it's decreased, and the pool of available grants has decreased.
Yep.
Where do we go from here?
Mm. I am, I am, I don't have an answer to that question. I mean, I feel really grateful um, as difficult as my parting of ways with Headlong was, the dance company that I co-founded in 1993, I feel grateful that that happened in 2019, so that I have essentially, I haven't left the field. I mean, my people are still Philadelphia arts ecosystem people, but I don't have to try to, I'm not in the middle of trying to like save a nonprofit dance company right now, or figure out what the budget is for the next piece and how we can equitably pay the dancers and designers and buy the set materials. Thank goodness, because I think my answer to that might be, let's just shut down. I mean, I don't see a way for small nonprofit arts groups to be able to continue in this environment. I mean, the funding has always been fickle. The funding has always gone in waves, and that makes it really challenging. Arts groups have been historically undercapitalized. Like, we don't have a cash reserve to lean on in moments like a pandemic, or just not getting one small grant out of many that we applied for, but we want to do the project anyway. And so we've always been on this kind of razor's edge of solvency. And now, like you say, the cost of doing business has gone way up. The funding hasn't gone up. The audiences aren't coming back. So I don't know. I feel like some of these big trees need to fall. Some small groups need to start growing up out of the composted wood of the big trees that fell. Big trees meaning like Lord Theaters, and I was going to say museums, but that's maybe a different conversation. But you know, Lord Theaters, white-led Lord Theaters, which is every Lord Theater in Philadelphia. Yeah, I think it might be time for some biggies to fall, for some new groups to form out of those resources that are more values-led, responsive to their communities, smaller scale, meaning they're more nimble, they're more able to adjust to the changing whims of the funding priorities.
Yeah, it. I always feel like it's the same conversation we were having pre-COVID, just with a bigger gap to fill.
Exactly. Yeah, the middle class of the arts ecosystem has been hollowed out, and that started way before the pandemic, but it's much worse now. Like, there are people working at Lord Theaters and museums and at places like GPCA that are making salaries, and they have health benefits, and you know, they're making $50,000 to $150,000 a year or whatever it is. They're W-2 employees. They're earning a living in the arts sector. And then there are the artists, people like you and people like designers and actors and dancers, choreographers, theater directors, who are not making stable incomes, who are not making $50,000 to $150,000 a year, who are struggling to get health insurance for their families and kids and selves, who are struggling to pay rent that's gone up. So it's just, yeah, once again, this kind of income inequality in the arts sector. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it's gotten worse. And where do we go from here? I mean, at a certain point, people have to leave because they literally can't make it work. And in general, because we live in a racist society, those are Black and brown people. Those are people without college degrees. Those are people who are immigrants or for whom English is a second language. Those are trans people, non-binary people, and people who've experienced discrimination and racial violence at work. So, you know, this trend continues, and it's very disheartening. And I don't know what I can do, but I just keep trying to like raise the alarm and raise awareness among my white peers, especially to try to push us in a direction towards more justice, more equity, more coalition building, more liberation, more sharing of resources, more conversation about this very topic.
Um, some good news about I don't know if it's good news about GPCA because they'll get their cut, but relatively good news in arts funding anyway. The Commonwealth Finance Authority approved the release of 15 million to arts and culture organizations, and the GPCA will get 495,000, which will be re-granted to local cultural organizations. And from what I've seen of the GPCA's new director, that'll probably be actually small local black and brown arts organizations, most likely. Like the grand majority of that'll go to actual small arts organizations, though I haven't seen or heard of any application for these grants yet. And this was approved in December. So I'm eagerly anticipating that. I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but
Well, full disclosure, I have been on the Philadelphia Cultural Funds Finance Committee for a very long time. I can't even tell you how many years. And I recently started doing some bookkeeping work for them when Gabriela Sanchez came on as the new ED, whom I love. Like, yay, Gabby. I think that was like the best possible hire for them, for us. Put myself in even though I'm not on the board, I'm gonna put myself right in there with the cultural fund. The cultural fund, unlike many grant makers, funders, foundations in this city, has a pretty equitable way of distributing funds to small arts organizations. They have a cap. You have to be under that 1.5 million to get the funds. It's 3 years of unrestricted funding. It's a peer process. There's a lot of good reason to trust. PCF has earned the trust of the arts community, I think, to distribute funds in an equitable way. So my question about GPCA is why not, or the state of Pennsylvania, why not just give the money to the cultural fund, which already has a system in place for distributing those funds, instead of GPCA having to invent some new process for receiving applications, judging them fairly, distributing the funds, especially for $500,000.
uh, I just from my experience in housing, social work, and government, I can say that every single time the state wants to deliver money to people, it becomes an entire cluster of meetings that could have been emails. Um, yeah, I mean, we were trying to figure out how to distribute. I think it was like $4 million in housing recovery funds, and we had the list of people who qualified for them, and all the work to get as many people signed up and vet them had already been done, and they just could not settle on how to get that funding distributed. Like for 2-3 months it took them, and people are sitting without money to pay their mortgage, or to provide money to their landlord, or whatever they needed to keep their housing. And they're sitting there for 2-3 months while these people, on meeting after meeting, week after week, just debate, well, are we going to give it to this organization that we've already distributed money through, or are we going to invent a new system, or do we need to hire somebody to do research into this? Do we need to hire a forensic accountant to make sure this all gets distributed? Question after question that just give people the money and let's figure it out afterwards, please.
Frustrating.
Yeah. So that, yeah, I mean, that's just, some insider baseball of having been in that space, and I don't really want to ever be in that space again because of it. Um, Let's jump to taxes real quick. I'd like you to get the chance to talk about what you came on to talk about. You run Philly Tax Prep for Artists, which is an organization of several. Is everyone considered an accountant? What is it?
Tax preparer is
Tax
really the
preparer.
word. Yeah.
And all the tax preparers that work with you can help artists file taxes, and you do it for generally a less invasive rate than other tax preparers. Back up. Hang on one second. Sorry, we'll see if this picks back up in a second here. Um, yeah, it looks like we should be back online. Sorry about that. My streaming software just randomly quit. It's never done that before. I have never ever had that happen. Um, at least not on this computer. Gonna have to look into that. So, yeah, if you could introduce Philly Tax Prep for Artists, talk about what it is you guys do, that sort of thing, and yeah, how it is you set your rates, and the folks that you work with.
Yeah. So this started, Philly Tax Prep for Artists was started out as just me doing tax prep for the dancers in Headlong and my friends. Um, I used to pay someone else to do my tax prep. And then I realized like, oh, I'm pretty good with numbers and budgets. I could probably figure out how to do this myself. And then I had a little bit of a knack for it. And I always like to credit my grandfather, Seymour Mintz, who was a tax attorney, because he answered many questions for me, explained many things. So grateful for that. Um, and then I met Christiane Capps, and it was just she and I, her and I don't know the right pronoun. Anyway, we did it together for many years. And then we started adding people because the need grew. The number of artists that wanted to work with us grew. And now there are 7 of us on the team. We work as a collective. We don't have an official entity, but we share clients and we share software and we share resources and knowledge with each other. Everyone on the team is themselves an artist, or extremely arts adjacent. Um, and so we really see it as mission driven for ourselves, even though we're not a nonprofit. The mission being to demystify taxes and the tax code for artists and to support artists and get them the best result with their tax return. So our rates have been historically much lower than what H&R Block or somebody like that would charge for a similar return. And as you noted, inflation and cost of everything has gone up. So most tax preparers are charging $400, $500, $600 for an individual return with a Schedule C. Our rates are now we just had to raise them because our software expenses went way up to $350 for a single filer, 500. No, yeah. So 355. I actually can't remember the rates off the top of my head because the season just started, but it's something like that. So we're committed to charging less than commercial tax preparers and even a lot of
Where so I and I'm assume a lot of taxpayers kind of think of this in tiers or like lines of demarcation of where would you say the line of where somebody should consult, say, Philly Tax Prep for Artists or another tax preparer is in terms of like annual income and like complexity of their tax picture?
Yeah, it's a good question. The IRS does have a free file program. And I love it when people leave my team and go and start filing their own tax returns. I think it's really empowering to file your own tax return. So I always encourage people to do that. I think it's great to learn about the tax code, maybe even work with a preparer 1 year and then use that return as a template to do it yourself the following year. So I don't think it's really based on the amount of income you have. I think it's more based on the complexity of the situation. So, for example, a lot of our clients are actors and dancers and performing artists, musicians that work for a lot of different payers. They'll have 10 or 15 different 1099s plus other income that they didn't get a 1099 for. So hopefully they're tracking that, tracking their expenses. So that's all information they need to give us and track for themselves. And we know how to enter it onto the Schedule C in a way that kind of reduces the tax liability for them or maximizes the benefit to them. But in the city of Philadelphia, and again, one reason we're committed to working with our local community, although we serve artists around the country, City of Philadelphia has its own very complicated tax code. So artists and other self-employed people have to pay business income and receipts tax or file business income and receipts tax, pay net profits tax. If you're working both in the city and out of the city, that can be a more complicated filing. Some artists work at places where their city wage taxes aren't being withheld. It's a W-2 job at, say, Princeton University. Why don't they do Philly wage tax withholding? I don't know. So that requires an earnings tax form to be filed.
As somebody who does payroll, I can tell you that it's most likely the payroll company's fault, and it's a nightmare to get fixed.
I know. Payroll companies are terrible. But still, I feel like a place like Princeton University really should be able to figure that out. There are multiple artists.
Isn't there an MBA program at Princeton?
Could you get some of those accounting people to come over to the payroll department and solve this very small problem? But yeah, so there are all these kind of city tax filings that need to be done. And honestly, it's a language you need to learn. Like I can fill out an NPT form in 3 minutes, but it would take someone else an hour. And they'd probably have to call someone at the city and not get through. And so that's another reason we do this work is the complexity of the city tax filings. So it's really not based on income level. It's kind of more like if you have a lot going on in your tax return or just on your Schedule C.
Yeah, I have multiple Schedule Cs because I have two businesses that are actually, with EINs of their own. I have my own income on 1099. I have my own income on multiple W-2s.
Yep.
Yeah, I use you guys, full transparency, every year. I'm a big supporter, and I appreciate the work that you all do. And it does your taxes can get very complex as an artist very quickly. A lot of people don't realize that even just operating as a freelancer means you're a business for the purposes of the city, state, and federal tax filings. There are some benefits to being a 1099 or actual EIN holding business in the arts versus being a W-2 employee. And I was wondering if you could touch on some of them, various write-offs, withholdings, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So part of the Trump tax bill of 2017, I think it went into effect in 2018, was eliminating the Schedule A deduction for unreimbursed employee expenses. So if you're an equity actor and you get only W-2s and you never get a 1099, you used to be able to deduct your equity dues and your local transportation to and from the gigs and auditions and everything. Now, no. I mean, you can still on the Pennsylvania level, on the state level, but it's a pretty small, the amount of money you're going to get from filing that unreimbursed employee expenses schedule for the state of Pennsylvania is pretty small. So unfortunately, that means that only people with 1099 income or self-employment income can deduct business expenses now. So what that means is, from the IRS's point of view, anything that's ordinary and necessary. So if you're an actor and you take a Lyft to an audition, that's a deductible expense because that's local transportation to the audition. If you get your hair and makeup done for that audition because you're required to look a certain way, that's ordinary and necessary business expense. The Zoom account you're using right now, the software and apps, all the home office that you inevitably use now because of our pandemic lifestyle, self-taping and the like.
Even if you use a shared office space, you know, like
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
like a
A lot of people have two offices. Like artists will have an art studio, but they're also using a home office to, write the grants or schedule the meetings or even do some of their artwork. So, yeah, there are a lot of deductions that artists can and should take on Schedule C. One of the things I'm committed to as a person and that Philly Tax Prep for Artists folks are committed to as well is transparency and open source. So if you go to the PhillyTaxPrepforArtists.com website, you can see the worksheet that we use with our clients, the deductions worksheet. And just, even if you're not working with us, use that worksheet to summarize your expenses, because those are all legit categories for reducing your taxable self-employment income.
Yeah, I reorganized my books into your worksheet categories because it just
Nice.
makes my filings easier at the end of the year.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
um, yeah, so I keep a P&L statement. There's a free P&L template on Google Sheets. And I use that essentially to track my income and expenses. And since I'm tracking it for the P&L statement, it works great to just copy and paste the segments of it into my tax filings. So, yep. And one of our viewers, Victor Fiorello, commented that he's a client and you guys are great. He also asked if you still live in I want to get the quote right here. Hold on. And does she still live in an awesome geodesic dome?
I do. Yeah, my husband and his brother, who is a contractor, built this geodesic dome home in 2004. So yeah, come visit me. It's actually really, I mean, we could have another conversation about this, but it's very green. We used a lot of um, green products like cork flooring and soy insulation. Not right away, but eventually we installed a geothermal system in the backyard for heating and cooling. We have a carport with solar panels and an EV and a hybrid, so plug-in hybrid. So there's a lot that I love about this house and how lightly we are stepping on planet Earth.
I make the it's not even really a joke. I make the statement every once in a while that I'm probably Philadelphia's only fully solar powered for-profit production company.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
we have a solar array on top of our house. It provides nearly 100% of our yearly electric usage. So
That
um,
is so awesome.
yeah, we when we bought this house, it was essentially a shell. We bought it under the HUD program that allows you to incorporate your rehab expenses into your mortgage.
Hmm.
And so we had spray and insulation done. We redid the roof in a reflective UV reflective roof.
Hmm.
We did a solar array. We did everything that we could. We got there was no HVAC in here, so we replaced the HVAC with really good HVAC. That was super efficient. At any rate, I wanted to recognize the time. It is 11:02, and I want to let the viewers know that we'd normally wrap up right at this very moment. But if Amy has like 10 more minutes, there's one more thing I wanted to cover.
Sure.
So if you've been watching up till now and you got to go, I appreciate your viewership. Please tune in again next week. We'll have we'll be talking taxes a little bit more with Tim White, who is also a tax preparer in the city of Philadelphia. On February 21st, we have Councilmember Kendra Brooks scheduled. We'll have other episodes in the meantime, but tune in every Wednesday, starting this Wednesday at 10 a.m. if you'd like to watch live. If you'd like to watch the replay, if you've got to go, please feel free to tune into the replay. It goes up instantly after we're done the broadcast on all the channels that we broadcast on. So YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Blue Sky, Live Push. It's on all those places, and you can watch the replay as soon as it's done. I wanted to talk about... to continue to talk about tax law and tax things that are in the works. There's an organization called AmericansForTheArts.org. I just learned about this because I was trying to research, changes in tax law that affect artists. One of their sponsored bills, the CREATE bill, Comprehensive Resources for Entrepreneurs in the Arts to Transform the Economy Act, went through both the House and the Senate in 2022, and it essentially reversed that tax code change by the Trump administration and made a lot of things back into the realm of write-off ability for W-2 arts employees, and then also improved the write-offs for entrepreneurs, self-employed or 1099 artists. And they have a package of programs on their page that they purport all fit together. I'm sure, this has been carefully crafted, but they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different bills that they are supporting. Most of these have been tabled or sent to committee, or any number of other time-saving techniques that the House and Senate uses when the speaker doesn't agree with the gist of a bill but doesn't want to be seen to be anti-whatever. But looking into all of these, what is the chances that there's any movement on any of these, say, in a second Biden term or in a Trump second term?
I don't think there's a lot of legislative appetite for tax bills that help artists. I'll give an example of my reasoning, or an example of why I think that. This is 2 or 3 years ago, Congress voted to reduce the threshold for 1099-Ks, which are third-party processors reporting business income to the IRS. So if you get a payment through Venmo or PayPal, up until now, if you have more than $20,000 running through Venmo and PayPal, you'll get a 1099-K. So the IRS knows about that income and you report it on your Schedule C. Congress voted to reduce that threshold to match the 1099 NEC, $600. So that was supposed to go into effect in 2020 for tax year 22. They delayed implementation. It was supposed to go into effect tax year 2023. They delayed implementation again. So it's just been kind of a shit show because the IRS is not ready to suddenly start processing. I think the estimate was like 45 million new forms being generated every year for everyone that has $700 of business income flowing through PayPal. So the idea that Congress would act to simplify or make things better for artists, I just I can't see it. Like, to me, that's a burning fire of nonsense that affects artists and anyone else who's in the gig economy or anyone else who's self-employed. And they should solve that problem first by bringing the threshold back up to 20,000. It's fraud prevention. Like,
Yeah.
I understand why they want to reduce that threshold.
Well, it also blocks the kind of the non-banks operating as de facto banks.
That's right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
the tech bro disruptor banks that
Right. Exactly.
that
Non-bank banks. But the other thing too is, I mean, this is kind of like, again, maybe a conversation for another day, but when artists and self-employed people deduct, and this is common, like this is what I'm doing every day for the clients I work with. And we end up with a very low net profit or even no net profit on our Schedule Cs. It means we're paying less into our own Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're self-employed your entire career, entire life, your Social Security distribution might be much lower than if you had any W-2 income or people that have been W-2 workers, employees their entire lives. So another thing that would really help arts workers, self-employed arts workers, would be the reform of our retirement system. Social Security being more robust and Medicare being more robust to take care of artists as they get older and retire. Because as it is now, we're incentivized to reduce, deduct, and that has a long-term negative impact on our long-term financial health.
I also found it interesting to note that during the pandemic, when the economy was essentially shut down, the federal government suddenly realized how large the self-employed or gig worker population is.
Yeah.
And and how essential it is to the economy, and provided all of us with some way of making a living that is essentially unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
But now that the economy is quote unquote robust again, they suddenly we don't exist anymore again.
Exactly. They opened the door. It was the first time in my lifetime that the federal government supported artists financially in a meaningful way, period. The only time that has ever happened, with this expansion of unemployment compensation to include the 30% of the economy that are self-employed people. It took a pandemic to do that, but we had the money as a government. We did that and didn't go broke. I mean, we are broke, but we're that's
we're broke in a lot of ways.
We're leveraged. But then they slammed the door shut again. And it's just so infuriating. It's such a simple fix. Like the child tax credit, the advanced child tax credit brought something like 5 million children out of poverty and food insecurity.
And they just let all of these things expire.
Yeah.
Like the underlying conditions disappeared somehow. I don't understand. Like, did we suddenly not have a bunch of children on the verge of poverty that were? Did a lot of people? I didn't see a news article about that. Like, did Elon Musk decide to provide food for did he actually provide the 600 million a year that the
he's advocating for a wealth tax?
I'm just
got together and they're like, wealth tax.
I'm just saying, like, did this happen and I wasn't paying attention? I'm confused. I'm really confused by lawmakers. I mean, this isn't my only confusion about lawmakers, but I mean, this ties into everything. I'm really, I was saying, I'm really jaded by the recent election. I'm really jaded by who won, how they won, and the things that people didn't consider in their vote, even though they're still complaining about them.
You're talking about the mayoral election in Philly?
The mayoral and everybody else that was elected during that election. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, so we elected Sherelle Parker. Yet the first thing that people I've seen in this year complaining about online is the PPA. You guys do realize who Sherelle Parker is, right? She's the council member who voted to give the PPA more money for free. Like,
Yeah.
she's the council member who's like, oh, we don't need that much in tax money from the PPA. Why don't we just give them a block tax write off?
I mean, it's, it's people like you, and I'll put myself in this category too, like to dig deep and really spend time to research and understand. But there's a whole like strata of voters who only have one thing in their brains when they go to the polls. And maybe with Sherelle Parker, it was like, yeah, I want a black woman mayor in Philadelphia. I
I
want
want
that
a
too.
black woman mayor too, but I want one
I
who's a
want a black woman
progressive.
mayor that's more progressive and arts friendly. Like there's so much that could be done to improve conditions for artists in the city of Philadelphia.
And
Um,
we're such a huge part of the economy, and
we're
this
huge.
particular mayor pays no recognition to that. Has never paid any recognition to that whatsoever. Whereas her
And
opponent,
Helen Kim would have really, I think, done a lot for artists in Philly. So I feel sad about that. But
I think any candidate other than Sherelle Parker would have done a lot for artists in Philly. Alan Dom, I've seen work on artist things. I've seen Rebecca Reinhart work on artist things. I've seen Helen Kim work on artist thing. I've seen uh, 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 David O work on artist thing. I
yeah,
mean, he was the artist council member for his entire career.
right. Yep.
He was the
Yep.
biggest supporter of the arts on the council for decades.
Yeah.
I don't know. Another one is, there's the thing of the sheriff's office hasn't held a an auction for going on something like 4 years now, because there's a lot of intrigue and questioning around how they chose the auction house that they've now assigned to run all of the Philadelphia property auctions. The auction house that they hired is a company out of Maryland that does auction websites and auction housing for a lot of different municipalities, but they're not a local institution, and there are local institutions that are capable of doing this. So, how did they get through the RFP process?
Right.
Is the question. Um, so, there's investigations into that, and in the meantime, Sheriff Bilal hasn't held any auctions. Um, you guys do realize you just reelected her, right? And there's these complaints about this, that these auctions aren't happening, that these properties are sitting vacant, that we're not making the income for the city. You do realize who you just reelected. The same person who decided that, the same person whose son was caught selling guns from the evidence locker of the PPD, you do. How do you not tie these things together? How do you read, like, if you're even like grossly involved in knowing what's going on around you? How do you not tie these things together when you go to press a button in a voting booth?
It's like our moral compass has a magnet next to it or something, and it's completely like waving in the wind like a crazy compass. I mean, I'm just outside of Philadelphia, but I'm in New Jersey, and Bob Menendez is my senator,
Mm.
right? And will be for the. I mean, what would it take for that guy to resign? I mean, it's just like these absurd, ridiculous, laughable, embarrassing moments of moral um, muddiness.
Moral and ethical ineptitude.
Unethical ineptitude is right. It's just really frustrating.
Yeah, and I just don't get how people don't tie the problems that they complain about together with the people that they elect.
Yeah.
And then the only people pointing this out are often people who are, trying to get you to vote for some idiot who's not going to do anything any better anyway.
Right, that's right. The lack of choice is also the problem. Uninformed electorates and lack of choice. And, again, it goes back to the church bells conversation. I think the right-wing extremists have done a really good job of chipping away at the public education system over the years so that a lot of people don't have a civics education. They don't have an understanding of how city government works, how state government works, how the federal government works, and the importance of voting for candidates that share your values and are, ethical and, um, are going to work towards your interests as a voter. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just I get flustered and confused every time I start to talk about these things. We didn't get really into talking about AI, other than I disclosed that I've been using AI for writing, but um,
Next
the
time.
yeah, we'll
That'll come back
we'll talk
again.
about it next time. But the crux of the argument is AI art? Is what AI produces copyrightable? Is it theft of copyright? Since all AI has to be trained on existing material, is it actually the in technicality, is it actually the work product of another copyright? That kind of thing. And there's a lot of legal cases going on in the world about it. I'd love to talk about those when we get a sec, but yeah, we'll talk about it next time. I don't think the subject of AI in art is going anywhere anytime soon.
Mm-mm.
I think it's unfortunately too fast and too slow of a development. Like,
Yeah,
it's too slow to suddenly be indispensable. It's too fast for the law to keep up with it.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And like many things, I think there are other countries that probably can do this better than us in this dysfunctional lands currently called the United States. So I feel like we should take whatever, Sweden or Germany or what, some other
The EU
developed
is having a
area.
really good debate about it right at the moment. Um, the EU copyright directive sets the framework for member states to consider AI in their copyright legislation,
Mm.
and the European Parliament has issued reports and like requests for information from the member governments and resolutions calling for clarity of the legal status of AI generated works in the EU. So they're kind of going about it democratically and trying to really reach into like the people that they represent and figure out, well, what do the people want? And I'm of two minds about this because I'm an artist, but I've also tried using AI, and to be quite frank, there are markets where AI is viable and would be useful. Unfortunately, that is to the detriment of artists and the value of arts.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've been writing business stuff with it. Um, I no joke, and you know this. I've spent 3 or 4 years looking for a business writer to help me with my business writing. I apply
And now
for,
you have one.
huh?
And
And
now you have one whose name is Chat GPT.
right, yeah, and now I have one whose name is ChatGPT, and I'm willing to pay ChatGPT $20 a month for that service. I'm willing to actually pay more. I was willing to pay a writer, literally whatever quote rate they quoted me, because I don't know what it's worth.
Yeah.
All I know is I'm not good at it.
Yeah, and that's an example of no one's copyright is being infringed, no one's work is being stolen when ChatGPT helps you clarify a template for a contract or a business plan. I think where it does get trickier, and we do need regulation soon, is on things like literal visual artwork, screenwriters, screenwriting,
Yeah.
like where AI is taking the work of or responding to the work of humans and replacing the future work of humans.
Well,
Um,
interestingly, I have to, in the business writing, force ChatGPT to stylistically follow my style of writing
hmm,
by giving it large blocks in the query session, giving it large blocks of what I've already written
hmm,
in order to get it to generate something that sounds somewhere near what I would write. And then I have to further edit it after I've
hmm,
gotten whatever best case out of ChatGPT I can to make it
yeah,
sound even more applicable and what I would write.
yeah,
Um, I don't I don't I don't feel like I'm violating anybody's copyright in that sense, but also the AI was trained on publicly available documents. Is any of that writing copyrighted? I don't know because it's a black box. I don't know what they trained it on. Um,
hmm,
is am I therefore stealing or paraphrasing or I mean paraphrasing in writing has always been legit. You can paraphrase anybody to your heart's content, and I'm not stealing somebody else's style because I'm trying to force it into my own style. But if I wasn't, am I stealing somebody else's style? Am I stealing the essence of their copyright?
hmm,
These are the questions we're tackling, and even more so in artwork, in visual arts, because it's a lot easier to define a style or a theme or identify what belongs to the original artist. Yet, you know,
if you bring me back and you want to talk about this more, I'll tell you a story about my son Dexter, who his job one of his he's in college, and one of his jobs is he is the editor of the University of Michigan satire magazine, every 3 weekly, and they've been embroiled in a copyright infringement issue from a photograph that was used 10 or 15 years ago, long before Dexter was involved with the website and paper. It's a physical paper that also has a web presence. So yeah, just some interesting questions came up in that setting with fair use of an image. It's basically the Onion, but for University of Michigan college
we
students.
should do a full like copyright episode. And I don't know if Meg
Yeah,
is still watching, but we should do a artists on copyright episode because this came up in conversation on social media. But like another Philly artist was talking about copyright, and I'm painfully familiar with copyright just because I first worked in photography, and it's a lot more protectable.
yeah,
It's a lot easier to protect copyright in photography,
yeah,
especially pre AI, pre anything that we would consider current technology. Photography, you can if somebody steals your photograph, it's your photograph.
that's right. You
It's
can find it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can really easily figure out whose photograph it is. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, there were questions about using copyright material. I don't want to get this person in trouble, but I do remember the exact thing that they were trying to do. They were trying to assemble an art show, like a visual arts show that was made up entirely of found what they called found artwork. And I asked for clarification because what they defined is I couldn't figure out what found artwork was first of all, and what they defined as found artwork was things that they had researched and found images of on the internet and elsewhere, but primarily on the internet in their research of a specific topic. And I'm like, no, All of that belongs in copyright to somebody else, and displaying it in an art show is a violation of that copyright. You'd need to seek a copyright license from the original artist or their estate,
Right.
or their heirs. Yeah, so yeah, we'll do a whole copyright episode and talk about copyright and what copyright is, what copyright isn't, what it allows you to do. It's really straightforward, and I'm always confused why people get confused by copyright.
Yeah.
Because it literally says what it does.
The moral compass. And hey, Mickey Mouse is now out
In the public domain.
Woohoo!
Not Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie.
Steamboat Willie Mickey.
Only Steamboat Willie, and be careful with your use of Steamboat Willie because Steamboat Willie is involved in Disney's trademark now because they've used that animation at the beginning of their films as a reel, so it's trademarked. So you can't use this gets so, it's not complicated, but it gets so mentally complicated.
Exactly.
It's a trademark. You can't use it to define your trade, your business. You can use it as your own artwork. It's in the public domain, but you can't copyright it because it's in the public domain.
Oh shit! But there's new artists out there. Do something with that mouse, please.
Oh, there's been people doing stuff.
Better.
You should look at some of the shit posting groups I'm on. There's a whole nother conversation in copyright and modern the modern zeitgeist and what is allowed and isn't allowed and all that. It gets fascinating, and I think we should talk about it. So it's 11:29, 11:30. I'm gonna get going. Do you have any last thoughts?
No, it's just been so nice to talk with you as always, James. I appreciate you. I appreciate this forum to share my thoughts with the world and engage with you. And yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's been really fun.
No problem. I'm gonna go to One Above Me. I'll outro the episode. I got to get going, but if you want to chat for a minute after I do the outro, stick around. All right. And thank you to you guys for tuning in this week, every week. Watching us in replay is a perfectly fine option. Feel free to comment on our posts on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch. Light Beef Productions on all of those outlets. Please like, share, subscribe, all of that good noise, and get us to the spot where more people see our work, because the more you interact with our work, the more people see it. The more people see it, the more likely it is folks pay attention to it, the more likely it is the messages of Black and brown voices, the opinions of minority communities get out there. And that's the mission and goal of this small production company based in the city of Philadelphia. If you would like to support us, please consider donating on Patreon, patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. The link is featured on our Facebook post. And if you would like to directly interact with us, get on the show, that kind of thing, please reach out on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, etc. Via direct message or comment. And we'll get you together with the associate producer, Meg Angelino, and get you on the show. So with all that being said, tune in next week. Tim White will be on the show. We'll talk a little bit more about taxes. We'll talk about more current events and more current topics. And I hope to see you then. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.